Hello, and thank you so much for joining me. My name is Jo Southall, and I'm an independent occupational therapist. I specialise in complex long-term conditions, and my main role is around teaching people with long-term conditions how to self-manage and how to cope with whatever it is their bodies and minds throw at them. I work in telehealth, which basically means I run all of my appointments via video chat, email, and social media. I'm also a placement educator, which means that I take students with me occasionally. Alongside that, I volunteer for the Hypermobility Syndromes Association as their in-house occupational therapist and on their medical advisory board. When I'm not doing all of those things, I'm also a conference speaker and professional educator, on a range of topics. I am here today to talk to you about workplace adaptations and how to get the best out of slightly uncooperative bodies and minds. Workplace adaptations can cover a range of different categories, and I've broken them down into 3 key areas. The first is environmental adaptation. This can include things like an ergonomic desk space, adaptive computer hardware and software, furniture, so new desk chairs, things like that, accessible office facilities like ramps, grab rails, and level access. The next category is coping strategies and skills. So this includes things like pacing, planning, prioritising, looking after your joints, managing pain, using prompts to help with poor memory, and ways to integrate self-care strategies into your workplace. The final area is modified duties. So this can include working reduced hours, having flexible hours, modifying your start time, taking more frequent breaks, reducing your physical duties, or carrying a smaller caseload, to name a few. Workplace adaptations can be temporary or permanent. Many people will find that their needs change over time as their health changes or their management skills improve. There is no set recipe for successful workplace adaptation. I would always recommend that support is provided based on an individual's needs rather than their diagnosis. As an example, not everyone with chronic back pain will find the same kind of office chair comfortable. Some will find sitting more painful than standing, and for others the reverse is true. The first challenge with adaptations is working out what is actually needed. One of the most common scenarios I work through with my clients is them not knowing what to ask for. They may have managers or team leaders who are supportive, who are willing to go the extra mile to make changes. But when they're asked how can I help, the honest response is, I don't know. Keep in mind that it is not your job to know what will help or what needs to be tried. That is the job of people like me and your occupational health department. That said, the only way to know if something is genuinely going to make a difference is to try it. There is always an element of trial and error involved. For those dealing with a change in health or getting to grips with a new symptom or condition, it can be really difficult to work out what's needed and how to implement it. So this is where the trial and error stuff comes in. It's important during trial and error phases to have open and honest communication, as well as a record of what's been tried and what the outcome of that trial was. Take a little bit of time, experiment, see what works, reflect back. Keeping symptom diaries or productivity diaries can be a really useful way to cope with this. So, as an occupational therapist, my specialist area is around coping strategies and skills. So that's what most of this presentation will focus on. But it is important to recognise that most people will need a combination of all of these 3 elements in order to really meet their full potential. You might need to learn to pace yourself, you may have some pain to manage, but you might also need a different kind of office chair or a different kind of mouse, and maybe a few hours work less a week. Okay, cool. So, the The first part of getting help is actually asking for it and knowing that help is needed. Disclosing a health condition can be difficult and is often really emotional. I want to prefix my advice here by stating that admitting to a health condition is not a weakness. Needing help or adaptation at work does not reflect failure in any way. Managing a long-term health condition is a full-time job. Anyone managing to work alongside having a health condition is an actual real-life superhero. Many of my clients live with quite severe levels of disability, and it's upsettingly common to hear them report that they feel like they're failing at work. A lot of us have been there, feeling like we're not doing a good enough job, and there is a lot of research to back up that this is a problem. Presenteeism among disabled people, which is where individuals are turning up for work even if they feel awful, even if they're really unwell, even if they perhaps shouldn't be there and should be in bed or even in hospital, is a serious problem. So, in order to start working through the actual realities of your experiences with work and what you're dealing with, I often ask my clients to complete a task or a series of small tasks. If this is something you struggle with, I would encourage you guys to try this too. So I ask my clients to write a list of every symptom they have on a regular basis. All of the aches and pains, emotional upheavals, digestive problems, memory difficulties, all of the challenges that they live with. I then ask them to write a second list. This list has all of the extras, all of the tasks, the medication, the therapy, appointments and adaptations that they've needed to make to their lives in order to stay fit and healthy. I then ask them what would happen if they stopped doing everything on the second list. For most people, the answer is they'd end up really unwell or in hospital. So, what I want this task to accomplish is to get people to recognise just how much extra they're dealing with compared to their healthy co-workers. This is a really useful task for anyone who's looking to disclose their health challenges or who needs to speak to an employer about the support they need. There is a delicate line that a lot of disabled people walk with regards to self-management. It's vital that the everyday management stuff, the medication, appointments, therapies, are all part of that person's normal. It is essential from a health perspective that it does feel normal, that it doesn't feel like you're doing all of this extra stuff all of the time. And it does help you to actually stick to what you're supposed to be doing. The flip side of this is that we can often get a little bit blasé about how much we're actually having to do. We stop recognising how much extra homework is there. We normalise things that are actually a massive challenge or even a medical emergency, and we put up with symptoms that healthy people would actually be really worried about. We just keep going and ignore everything as long as possible. The problem with this is that when it comes to accessing support and recognising that we're struggling, what tends to happen is that we don't really notice how big of a problem it is. We've lost sight of what normal and happy and healthy feels like. So when we're asked, what can I do to help? The honest response is, I don't know. I don't even know what I need help with. This task often throws up a lot of feelings, hopefully relief and acceptance, but it can also be upsetting to recognise that your health is severely impacted. You are limited in some ways. In a workplace setting, it can also cause a bit of anxiety. People will feel like maybe they aren't worth the extra effort. I do have a whole slide later on which basically lists all the reasons you should, stay employed, the reasons that disabled people are worth the effort. But I will just point out that actually, if you took one of your healthy colleagues and you gave them a sprained ankle or flu or a migraine, they almost certainly wouldn't come into work the next day. So if, as a disabled person, you are managing to make it into work most of the time, despite a lack of support and appropriate adaptation, you're already showing just how dedicated you are to your job role. Okay. So, my top tips for disclosure are not to do it in person. This is a high stress, upsetting and complicated topic. It is totally okay to practice how you're going to do it, what you're going to say, what you want to ask, and do it via email or a letter. It is okay to edit and draft and redraft your content before sending it. You can practice this with a friend or a family member or a colleague or a UK-based occupational therapist. Find somebody to talk it through with and practice before you actually hit send and give it to your line manager or your boss or whoever it is. If you've written this planned response, hopefully it takes some of the anxiety and stress out of it, out of the experience. You can make sure you've listed all of your key points and concerns, plan your script in advance, and then finish it by asking for an appointment at a later date to discuss what can actually be done. This all helps to take the upset and the emotion out of asking for help. It's easier to give a rehearsed speech than it is to think up everything you want to say on the spot. Likewise, it's also easier for your employer not being put on the spot because they can have a think about how they can help you before having to respond. If you are a team leader or a manager, please, please, please let your employees know it's okay to do it like this. It doesn't have to be a big spectacle. It can just be an email with a list of things you're struggling with, and you work through it together. Okay. So, as an occupational therapist, I work with people to help them learn to self-manage their own health challenges. I support people in developing a health toolkit that allows them to cope with whatever their bodies or minds throw at them. Individuals who are experienced using this toolkit are more likely to self-manage new or changing symptoms, are less dependent on having healthcare done to them rather than actively managing themselves, and are usually more confident and engaged with their lives. They tend to take more responsibility for their own health and are more likely to actually get all the little extra bits done that their therapists and doctors have recommended. A toolkit is usually made up of 3 key areas. So the first bit is coping strategies, and that's what we're going to focus on a little bit later on. All of the coping strategies I'll be talking through are parts of my everyday life that I need to do in order to manage my own health. So I am passionate, I have tested all of this stuff out, and I know it works. What we're talking about are things like pacing, sleep hygiene, looking after your joints, body awareness, listening to your own symptoms, but also communication and self-advocacy. In addition to the coping strategies, you also need a decent bit of knowledge and education. So this may be understanding your diagnosis, knowing who to turn to with a new symptom, or if you need to get referred on, or what support you can access. It also includes the kind of expert patient skills where, particularly if you're dealing with a rare condition, you may have to get quite good at explaining things to doctors. They don't know everything. Us healthcare professionals need to learn too. The final part of your health toolkit is physical items. So this can be small aids and equipment or mobility aids, little bits of tech to help you do certain bits of your job, or gadgets in the kitchen to help you open jars. All of these things come together in a way that means what you can do is pick and choose what you need to support yourself at any given moment on any day of the week or year. So, pacing is a topic I'm hugely passionate about. I love teaching pacing because it's something that seems relatively simple but can actually be massively life-changing. Pacing is a key element to managing fatigue and pain, but it's also excellent for avoiding workplace burnout, anxiety, and excess stress. Proper pacing is one of the best ways to reduce negative symptoms and improve productivity. and the quality of your work you're producing. The average adult can only concentrate fully on a task for about 20 minutes, which means by halfway through this presentation, some of you will have started to zone out and not pay attention too much. After that, our attention starts to drift, our productivity decreases, the quality of our work will reduce, we'll be more easily distracted and less likely to notice mistakes. In an average 8-hour shift, most people will achieve about 3 hours of full concentration. If you're dealing with pain or fatigue or depression or stress, your concentration is likely to be a bit worse. Proper pacing will help, and not just for those of us with chronic symptoms. Pacing benefits everyone. With pacing, what we're talking about are breaking challenging activities into easy bite-sized tasks. It's about efficient use of your time and energy. Work smarter, not harder. So the phrase that's key here is boom and bust. This is a pattern of activity that often leads to burnout. What tends to happen is that on good days or busy days, people push themselves hard, they achieve a lot, they get a lot done, they're constantly on the go. And then they wake up the next morning feeling absolutely awful. They've crashed. There's then a period of recovery where very little is achieved. Most people feel pretty rubbish and will then have to build up their activity levels again, and then overdo it again, and then crash and have to recover. This is a pretty common pattern. A lot of people do this in their lives, but people with pre-existing conditions don't tend to survive it quite as well. We tend to hit burnout sooner, we tend to burn out harder, and it will have more serious consequences for our long-term health. Boom and bust is not sustainable. Over time, you will have more time at the bottom, burnt out, not achieving much, and your time at the top will get gradually less and less effective. What we're looking to do with pacing is to take that blue squiggly line on the diagram and turn it into that red dotted line. What I would like is for all of you to be able to predict roughly on any given day sort of how you're going to feel, what you're going to be able to achieve. We're going to level everything off so that you're getting the same thing done most of the time, rather than having days where you feel fantastic, followed by days where you can't get out of bed. So, the first strategies are micro breaks. Micro breaks can be as short as 10 to 30 seconds. It's all about getting a tiny break from whatever you're currently doing. As an example, emails. A lot of people will dive into their email inbox and will just work through one and then go straight onto the next one and straight onto the next one. I used to do this. I used to press send, watch the little bar sync my emails, and then jump straight into the next one. Now I press send, I'll then close my eyes, have a little bit of a stretch, maybe move my shoulders and neck around. I might have a sip of drink, do a little bit of gentle exercise. And then when my inbox is synced and I'm feeling okay again, I'll go back to work. 10 to 30 seconds does not disrupt your workday significantly. You are not losing out on vast amounts of work time. What you might do though is drastically improve how you feel towards the end of the day. A lot of us have a tendency to kind of accumulate symptoms. So you start feeling pretty good in the morning, but if you add in too many hours of computer work, you've then got a bit of backache or neck ache or a bit of headache, or your shoulders start to feel really stiff. That combination of things that sneak up on you is what we're looking to avoid here. Micro breaks are also an excellent opportunity for self-care. So use your micro breaks to look after yourself. Take a sip of drink, check on a colleague, fidget, adjust how you're sitting. If, like me, you have a lot of chronic symptoms that can kind of vary in severity, take a little minute or a second even to run from head to toe and just see how you're feeling. If you notice anything that's a little bit not great, Deal with it then and there. Don't put things off. Proactive is always better than reactive. As an example, if you get a little bit of a headache from doing too much computer work, a 5-minute break and a cup of tea and maybe a little bit of fresh air is often all you need to feel better. If you get a little bit of a headache, don't take a break, keep persevering with emails for 4 hours or 5 hours. You then find yourself in need of painkillers and a darkened room. Your recovery is much, much longer. So rather than a 5-minute break, what you then need is 3 or 4 hours to recover. So the more efficient use of your time is to pace yourself. Okay. The next strategy is activity alternating. If you have a chronic problem, particularly pain or fatigue, you've probably noticed that too much of anything can cause problems, even the things that generally make you feel better. Repetitive activities tend to be a particular problem. So, with activity alternating, what I'd like you to do is to swap between different tasks that have different demands on your body. So if you have a think about the tasks you do on a daily and weekly basis, and see where you could split them into these categories. The first one is physical tasks. These are things that challenge your body, that make you work physically hard, but don't require too much in the way of concentration. It may be things like walking, standing, stairs, filing, moving between different areas. Traveling often is quite a physical task. These are things that your body might need to recover from afterwards. Cognitive tasks is the next group. I think it's pretty common to underestimate how exhausted you can get from using your brain consistently. So cognitive tasks are things that make you think, make you concentrate, require you to be really, really focused for extended periods of time. This is a cognitive activity for me right now. I'm very comfortable, but remembering what comes next on my slides and my notes makes my brain work quite hard. Your relaxed activities are then things that allow you to unwind and relax. Things that don't strain your body or mind too much. In a workplace setting, this category might be a little bit limited, but you should be doing these pacing strategies in your home lives as well. At which point, I'd hope you've got a few more hobbies to swap into. So, when you're alternating between activities, as an example, if I've just spent 40 minutes recording a presentation, my brain is at its limit. I need to have a fidget break, but physically, no problem at all. So I might get up and go and load the dishwasher, or go and spend 20 minutes in the garden checking on my plants. I'm still taking a break for the bit of my body and mind that needs a rest, but that doesn't mean I can't use the rest of my body for something useful. After I've done that, I might sit down for a little bit, have a cup of tea, read a chapter of a book, before going back to something that requires my brain to work a little bit harder afterwards. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. If you're in an office setting, as an example, there's often a tendency to finish all of one job before moving on to the next. So somebody might type all of their notes up for one session, get all of that work done, and then print off everything, and then file everything. If you're alternating, try finishing one bit of a task, printing it, and then filing it, and then going back to the next. Taking breaks as part of your work day can help it to flow a lot more easily. Okay. Pacing tends to work really, really well for situations where the individual has complete control over their environment and their schedule. I am a realist. Sometimes you just need to get a job done, regardless of how rubbish you feel, how tired you are, or how inconvenient it is. This is where planning comes in. So, have a think about the tasks you do on a regular basis as I work through this next section. Your green activities are pretty easy. Don't cause you too many problems, don't require any adaptation. These are things that you don't have to think twice about, you can just do them. Often, a lot of the green things tend to be done sitting down. Your amber activities are things that are a little bit more complicated. You might have to think about a tiny bit, you might have to modify, so you do some of the tasks sat down rather than stood up. Or you limit yourself on time, so you can do 10 minutes but not 15. Generally speaking, your red activities tend to be the bigger ones. Red activities wipe you out completely. You've completed that task and you know you're going to feel absolutely awful the next day. You are completely exhausted. That's it. Red activities are often big social events, big business events, or anything with a hard deadline or a lot of travel involved. You can probably all think of quite a few red activities. When you're planning your week or your month or you're looking at your calendar, try to avoid having red activities next to each other. If at all possible, spread them evenly throughout your week or your month. Then start looking at your amber activities. Spread them evenly throughout the day. Don't do all of the amber stuff first thing in the morning. Have lunch and then you've run out of energy already. Your green activities can be used to pace other activities. So if you have to travel for work and it's exhausting, try leaving a little bit earlier, finding somewhere comfortable and just sitting down for 10 minutes and doing a green activity before you then have to tackle the next bit of your red task. By breaking tasks up in this way, what you've done is turn one red activity into 3 or 4 amber activities and a handful of green ones. Obviously, this doesn't completely solve the problem. There are still going to be times where you get a bit tired. This is where you start planning your recovery time in. If I have completed a red task, I know my next day needs to be mostly green. If I had planned to get 3 hours of work done, write a presentation, walk the dog, go to the gym, and do the weekly food shop, and I couldn't achieve any of that, I'd feel pretty rubbish. From a mental health perspective, it would be really difficult to deal with. However, if I had planned a day where everything was pretty easy, there wasn't too much high stress, I didn't have many challenges, and I managed to achieve all of them, that feels much better. That feels like I've taken control of my recovery and I've decided that I'm going to have an easy day. I'm working with my body, not fighting against it. Okay. In terms of communication, with these key words that I'm giving you, so traffic light systems, micro breaks, explain these words to your colleagues, to your friends, to your family. Start developing a shared language. One of the difficult things for a lot of people with long-term conditions is being able to explain how they're feeling without it sounding like they're complaining or they just don't want to talk about it. If you can simplify something right down to, yes, boss, I can do that, but it's a red activity. That level of communication has been simplified, but also made much more meaningful. If your colleagues understand what you mean by a red activity, you don't have to go into detail. You can just say, it's red. And they'll know that maybe you need a little bit of support, or they shouldn't pester you first thing in the morning the next day. You may also find that these strategies help more than just you as an individual. Pacing is something I have taught at a corporate level to offices full of healthy people because it avoids workplace burnout. You will be pleasantly surprised by how many people benefit from these strategies, even if they don't have a pre-existing condition. So, the next little bit is sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene is a set of recommendations aimed at improving the quality of your sleep, and making it easier for you to fall asleep. Many people with long-term conditions struggle with unrefreshing sleep, with insomnia, or with feeling restless or struggling to get comfortable. Sleep hygiene is aimed at improving that. I don't have time today to work through all of it, but you can easily find this information online. What I'm going to work through are the key areas that I think most people struggle with. So, your sleep environment is the first area to look at. Your sleep environment, or your bedroom, should just be for sleeping. If at all possible, don't work in bed, don't answer emails, don't use a smartphone, don't watch TV or read. If, for health reasons, you have to spend a little bit more time in bed, try to do something differently so that your body and your mind recognize the difference between in bed completing a task and in bed going to sleep. If you're going to read in bed, sit up, and then when you lay down, your brain knows that it's time to go to sleep. There needs to be a distinct difference. The next little bit is around your sleep routine. Create a routine for getting ready for bed. This doesn't need to be a complicated 10-step process, but even if you just do 3 tasks like brush your teeth, get changed, check your alarms ready for the next day, and then get in bed, try to complete them all in the same way every single night. If you have to travel for work, try to recreate them as closely as possible, right down to recreating your sleep environment. If I'm staying in hotels, I will have the same items on my bedside table as I do in my own home. I've recreated my environment as closely as possible. The next little bit is on backlit technology. So our bodies go through hormonal cycles that regulate sleep and awake. These are partly triggered by exposure to daylight, particularly the blue end of the light spectrum. Smartphones, e-readers, laptops, and all other backlit devices give off blue light too. Every time you check your phone or open your laptop after dark, the light from your device tells your brain that it's daytime. We are constantly surrounded by things that confuse our bodies into thinking we should be more awake than we actually should be. So, if you're going to use devices after dark, make sure you're using a blue light blocking app, or you're using blue light blocking glasses. You can actually wear them like sunglasses, except they're a really nice shade of orange. This is particularly important for shift workers if you're trying to convince your body to let you be awake and asleep at completely the opposite times that it wants to naturally. Okay. So, next little bit, flexible use of tools. Everyone, everywhere has good days and bad days. For those of us with highly variable health, those good days and bad days can be radically different. On a good day, I can spend 5 hours in the garden, working on my hands and knees, lifting plant pots, digging. On a bad day, I struggle to get out of bed on my own. There is a common misconception that all forms of disability are completely fixed, that we all wake up feeling the same way every single day, but that just is not true. Our pain levels, mobility, ability to concentrate, cognitive processing will vary. With that in mind, it's completely sensible to use different tools and strategies on different days, depending on how you feel. I actively encourage variable use of mobility aids. Using pacing as an example, on a bad day, you may need more breaks. You may have a shorter tolerance for physical tasks. You may need to stop earlier in the day. On good days, you might be able to do 2 small tasks without a break at all. Mobility aids and assistive items can and should be used in the same way. It is totally acceptable to use mobility aid for your commute to work and then not use it in the office. There is a big difference between walking from your desk to the kitchen than there is walking down the street surrounded by strangers. You can use mobility aids in ways that make you more confident and more comfortable. As an example, having a folding walking stick in your handbag and just using it for stairs. Totally acceptable, actually very sensible. Okay. Just wanted to say, finally and firmly, you do not need to use a tool permanently in order for its use to be valid. It's totally okay not to need stuff all of the time. Also, consider your home life alongside work. You may need different strategies and tools for different aspects of your life. Many people unconsciously set their homes up in ways that meet their needs. The furniture will be put in places that makes that individual's life easier. The kitchen will be set up with the most frequently used items at the right height. Workplaces are a lot more challenging because they aren't designed with any one individual in mind. They're generic. You may need more support at work than you do at home. That is completely normal and easily understandable. So, coming towards the end now. The majority of people with a long-term health condition or a challenge will have picked up some natural skills along the way. We develop skills that allow us to operate well in a world that is not well suited to our bodies and minds. A lot of what I teach as an occupational therapist, I've learned in my own life because of my own health problems. It's not stuff I learned at university. It's stuff I worked out the hard way and then taught to others. People who face regular challenges in everyday life are very often natural problem solvers. We're used to solving problems that people without our challenges don't even notice. Common sense and life experience teach lessons that academic study does not. You cannot teach common sense, but having a long-term health problem will often make you have common sense. Empathy and understanding is also really important. Disability is the only minority group that anyone can become a part of at any point in their life. Most people will at some point experience ill health or injury, even if it's temporary. It can be incredibly difficult. I know my friends and family have struggled with short-term illness or injury, and I've been able to help them because I have the experience to manage illness and injury. So those skills help me to improve my friends and family's lives, and you can do the same for your colleagues. It also allows me to empathise with my clients. I have built a service that's accessible to a whole range of people because it's also accessible to me. If your service meets the needs of your disabled employees, the chances are it will also meet the needs of your disabled clients or service users. That is a good thing. Shared experiences and understanding can also help hugely building therapeutic relationships, building working relationships with disabled clients. Having an accessible environment and a series of colleagues who understand the basics of disability and support also means that if any of your colleagues end up ill short term, the support they need is already in place. The office is already accessible to them. Self-care skills can also be put to good use. The last the last sort of year's worth of coronavirus pandemic has been challenging for a whole host of reasons, which I'm not going to get into now. What I will say is that when the UK had its first lockdown, a lot of my healthy friends really struggled. They didn't know how to work from home. They struggled socialising via social media. They were frustrated at not being able to access external facilities. Conversely, a lot of my chronically ill and disabled clients didn't have those challenges. They'd already learned the skills they needed to cope in a lockdown environment, which meant that my healthy friends were then coming to me for advice on how to work from home or how to modify their routines so that they could still exercise without being able to go to a gym. These things were useful. Balancing health challenges and work is difficult, but what you learn can also help other people. All of the skills I've shared today in this talk have the potential to help reduce workplace burnout and stress and improve productivity. These are skills that can help everyone, regardless of their starting point health-wise. Working with your colleagues, your peers, and your managers to improve coping strategies is the best way to improve the skills for everyone in your office or work environment. I will just finish by giving my contact details out. This is an emotive topic and it can be complicated. If you are not comfortable asking questions publicly, you are welcome to get in touch with me at any time using these details. I really hope you found this useful, and I welcome any feedback you'd like to give me. Thank you so much for listening.